Welcome, everyone. We're going to give everyone just a second here to trickle in, and then we'll get started. Right. Thank you all for joining us for the National Center for Rural Road Safety's October webinar called Selling the Safe System Approach. We're going to go through just a few webinar logistics for you to get started. First, my name is Jamie Sullivan. I'm the director for the National Center for Rural Road Safety. We'd also like to thank our co-sponsors for today, the National LTAP Association Safety Work Group. Today's webinar is going to be 1.5 hours in length. To activate closed captions for the webinar, you're going to click on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. You may adjust your captions under the caption setting, which is the same button. You can see an example of what that button looks like on the top right of our PowerPoint right now. Today's webinar is being recorded for website archival and will be available within a week on our website at ruralsafetycenter.org/webinar-archive. There you will find all of our previous webinars that we've done as well. Today, if you have any questions for our presenter, please use the Q&A pod at the bottom of your screen for those questions. You can also use that to alert organizers of any technical difficulties. The chat pod you can use to introduce yourself or to talk back and forth as participants. But again, if you have questions, please try and get those in the Q&A pod to make sure that we can find them. Handouts are available for download. Those will be posted to the chat pod periodically throughout today so that you can download those. At the end of today's webinar, there will be a feedback form. We would love to have your feedback on that, especially additional topics you'd like to see us address in the coming months. And lastly, we will provide certificates of completion for today's webinar. You can expect those in your email boxes within 4 to 6 weeks after today's webinar. There will also be a link in that email for you to apply for CEUs if you need that more formal CEU. So again, 4 to 6 weeks from today's date, you should see those in your email box. We have a few announcements for you all. As you know, the National Center for Rural Road Safety has started a Home Safely podcast, and we have released episode 4. In this episode, you will hear Matthew Enders being featured. He is the Technical Services Manager for the Washington State Department of Transportation's Local Technical Assistance Program and oversees the state's Traffic Engineering Safety Group. In his conversation with Kevin, you'll hear about challenges of Washington's rural roadways, how Washington State DOT met those challenges through comprehensive efforts such as road safety plans, systemic approach, and being proactive. So you can find the podcast on our website at ruralsafetycenter.org. Across the top, you will find the podcast as its own dropdown. You can also use a QR code shown on today's slide. We also have our Road Safety Champion program, which is the Safety 101 program. We are currently going into starting our planning and engineering pathway modules on Tuesdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, starting on November 4th. And we are going to be piloting our public health modules on Wednesdays from 2 to 4 Eastern, starting November 5th. With a note that 2 of those modules will be held at a slightly different time just due to trainer availability. You can sign up for those now on our website. And again, you can see those QR codes on the right-hand side. We also wanted to make you aware of 2 upcoming awareness weeks that are going to be happening here at the end of October and the beginning of November. The very first one is NHTSA's Fall Vehicle Safety Recalls Reminders. This one is being held October 27th through November 2nd. You can find more information on the Traffic Safety Marketing website, which is that QR code at the top. And then you can also find Crash Responder Safety Week information at those 2 QR codes at the bottom. One will take you to the National Traffic Operations Center to find out more information about what they are doing, as well as our partners at respondersafety.com at the other QR code. This theme for this year is Safety Starts With You, Slow Down and Move Over. And that week will be held November 17th through the 21st. So again, 2 great awareness weeks for you to all participate in. So please take a look at their websites. And now I'd like to get you to where everyone came to be, and that's to hear our marketing manager for the National Center for Rural Road Safety, Kevin Elliott. He has come back with another one of his great communication webinars for us. Kevin is a veteran professional communicator who has worked for nearly 9 years in transportation safety communication. In addition to the center, his clients include departments of transportation in Florida, Ohio, and South Dakota, as well as many safety teams in the Federal Highway Administration. He lives in Panama City, Florida, with his wife and his 12 chickens. And I'm really excited for him to talk to you today about selling the safe system approach. So, Kevin.
Thank you, Jamie. Let me share my screen real quick and make sure that's going to work. I'll say hello to everybody. Okay, you see my title screen?
Yep, all set.
Okay, good. Welcome, everybody. I'm having a blast over here in the chat pod, first of all. This is a fun group. I'm looking where everybody's coming from around the country, and this is a true national webinar. You all keep telling me where you're from. It's super cool. The only one I have a question about, April, I need you to tell me where Muckleshoot is. I don't have any clue where that is, but I feel like I want to go there. So somebody just put that in there and tell me, and then we'll carry on with the webinar. Yeah. So welcome, everybody. Let's jump right in. Jamie just introduced me, and so I'm going to move quickly through this. I never quite know who knows me or what, but I always feel the need to sell myself a little bit to my audiences to make sure that you know why you're here, and also that I prove a little bit that I hopefully have something valuable to say. I am a marketing manager here at the National Center for Rural Road Safety, and have a team of folks who are amazing and do great communication stuff. If you saw that podcast, that's our latest. Is that Ida Van Chalkwick from Olympia, Washington? Hello, Ida. Apologies. I didn't mean to. Muckleshoot Tribe in Western Washington. Thank you very much. It's such a great job being the marketing manager of the National Center because, one, you get to meet people from all over the country. This is you all are doing amazing work out there, and so we want to equip you. We want to equip the doers, the ones who are out there on the roads where the rubber actually meets the road. And our latest effort is that podcast. And I saw somebody from Washington State. There's a lot of Washington State folks here who know Matt and Matthew Enders. If you know him, he's amazing. I do recommend you listen to him and all the other episodes because the folks that are on there are so great. And it's a way for you to meet these people around the country who are doing the same work as you. Because I know transportation safety, especially in rural areas, can be very, very hard work. It's tough stuff. And so we want to encourage each other. And that's the point of this webinar, is to encourage and equip you. Like Jamie said, I do this type of work, transportation safety communication for lots of agencies. I call myself a transportation translator, translating the technical stuff that you all do for folks who aren't in this every day. They aren't in the trenches like you are, and helping them understand. So that's really a big goal of this webinar as well, is to equip you to then explain these complicated topics like the safe system approach. It can be nuanced and sophisticated. How to explain it to people in ways they can understand. People who just don't work in this every day like we do. I do raise chickens, and I put that out there because in every group of people I speak to, every single one, there are chicken people out there. And so since this is a very active chat pod, hey, chicken raisers, put your favorite breed in the chat pod. That would be awesome because I can't see your faces out there. You know who you are. It's okay. This is a safe space. KFC. Robert, stop. 18. There you are. Chicken raisers unite. Okay, let's jump in. Here's what you're going to learn. Here's why we're here. I'm going to give you tips for communicating the safe system approach. These are not all the tips. These are not the only way that you can talk about this, but this is some ways that we've been working on, in ways that we and others have found success, because we know the safe system approach is a very big deal. It's an effective approach. It's been proven to be effective when it is implemented in other countries around the world. And it's relatively new to the States. And so we are trying to equip people with the words to explain this new concept because the human brain wants to apply new things to old things. And what we don't want to do is for people to have in their mind that this is just a rehashing of some other stuff that we've already done. It is a wholly new approach for tackling transportation deaths. And so we want to make sure we're communicating well. I'm going to give you some tips and a practical approach. So there's some just general communication tips and then a practical approach, step by step, for how you can explain this to people, and also maybe understand it a little bit better ourselves. A lot of this webinar came from me trying to understand it and me getting it in my mind. How would I explain it to myself? How would I translate it to myself? And then give you some real world examples, ones that I've seen people use, one that I've taken from other people, and then some that I use as well. So let's jump into some tips. Oh, by the way, I love cheesy stock photography. If you've ever seen one of my presentations, there's no other reason to have these photos in there. I just like cheesy photography. And so this is going to be us at the end of this webinar. You're going to be sitting back, just open mouth laughs. We're going to be having a great time because you're going to know how to communicate the safe system approach. That's just from my personal enjoyment. Your first tip is I'm going to just list these out, and the names may not make that much sense to you till we get in there, but I'll explain as we get in. Start with why. You may have heard that phrase. It's a very sort of buzzword right now, buzz term in corporate communication. Find your analogy. Analogies are great communication tools. I'm going to give you some to use when we're talking about the safe system approach. Go in order. There is an order that I recommend for explaining the safe system approach because it has principles, it has elements, it has an application, it has lots of information going on in there. And at least, again, based on my training as a communication person, but also just my experience and the way my brain works, I'm going to give you a step-by-step. You say these things first, then say these things, and I think it will help you to communicate it. And then you're going to tell them what to do, because once you've given people the information, the step that sometimes we skip is, okay, so what? What would you like me to do? And I'm going to give you some examples of what you can say to people. So, okay, how do I start to apply this, and what you can say? And then end with why. And I have a story to tell you at the end that I think is that you can incorporate one of your own to really help drive all this home. So let's start at the top. Start with why. There's a book called Start with Why, and it's written by a guy named Simon Sinek, Sinek. And he is a communication and corporate leadership and corporate culture expert. And he wrote a book called Start with Why that came from a TED Talk about something he called the golden circle. And he said the problem is in corporate America, but really just everywhere we go, we talk too much about the what of what we do. Could we say that like at cocktail parties or at Thanksgiving or when we just met somebody? Say, what do you do? And we go into the what of what we do. We tell them all the things about our job. And the truth is, most people don't care that much. They're just being polite. However, Sinek, so we start with what we do and then maybe how we do it. And if they keep listening to you, and they probably won't, but if they do, you eventually get to why do you do that? Why do you get into transportation safety? Why is this important to you? And then you're going to say something really meaningful and powerful, like, well, I love my county and I grew up here and I just want to make sure everybody gets home safely. Or you're going to say, oh, well, I had a friend or a cousin or somebody who died on the roadway, ran off the road and hit a tree. And I want to make sure that never happens again to another family because it was one of the worst things that ever happened to us. Something like that. Those are compelling. So Sinek says, why don't you start with that? So when somebody says, like, what do you do? You say, well, let me tell you what. I grew up in this county and I know that my neighbors, I want them to get home safely. I want us to thrive. I want them to get where they're supposed to go and live their lives and not lose loved ones. Okay. Now, if somebody says that to you at a meeting or a cocktail party, you're going to be interested in that person. And the reason is because they started with purpose. They started with why they do what they do. What is important? We always respond to those kinds of messages. And then they will say something like, well, how do you do that? How do you save lives on your road? And then you can tell them about your job. So if we're using that principle, if we're starting with why we do what we do, the question is not to ask what is the safe system approach? Like what is that? Because if you ever explain this, and I used to do this too, I would start to say, well, it has 5 elements and all these principles and elements, and here's what, and I would go into the details of the what of the safe system approach, but I hadn't explained to people why we should do this in the first place. So the question is not what is the safe system approach? The question is why the safe system approach. So we start with what, we go to why. That's how we normally communicate. That's a mistake. Flip it around and say, why do we do the safe system approach? And the people who developed this and communicate this actually gave us a really powerful why. And it's this: imagine a world where nobody has to die from vehicle crashes. I love that phrase. I love it because if you can go in and we can talk about the importance of roundabouts or rumble strips or speed management or any of the things that contribute the what of traffic safety, the what of rural fatalities. And those are powerful, but what you can say is, hey, imagine with me. Dream a little dream with me. Imagine we had a world where nobody died in a vehicle crash. That's a great way to start a conversation because people are going to say one of a few things. They're going to go, do you think that's possible? I do think it's possible. Let me tell you how. Or they go, there's no possible way. You can't do that. And you say, well, I think we can. See, starting with purpose opens conversations and it invites people to be their best selves. Imagine with me. Imagine a world where no one has to die of vehicle crashes. And there are lots of examples, and I'm going to give you some later on, of big, difficult, systemic social problems that we have had that some small group of people said, I think we can probably get rid of this. Imagine a world where nobody has to die of polio. Now, if you grew up in the 1930s or 40s and someone said that to you, you would say, we can't do that. That doesn't work until Jonas Salk developed the polio vaccine. And now we have a world, at least in America, where no one dies from polio. Okay. That is a great way to start talking about the safe system approach. And the first sort of principle of the safe system approach is death and serious injury are unacceptable. We just won't live like this. This isn't a way this isn't something we should accept, that 40,000 people every single year die on roads. Now that can be a controversial thing because people can say, well, you can't, it's impossible, which leads us to our next tip that I want to give you. So starting with why, starting with purpose, it puts you and it puts your audience in the right mindset. And then it also invites conversation. Purpose is a conversation starter. Dreams are conversation starters. So start there. Start with the why. Death and serious injury are unacceptable. Here's another thing too, by the way, and I would love to do a webinar on this, the principles of persuasion. But here's one. If I can get you to agree to what we call a premise, my premise, which is a statement of fact. I say death and serious injury are unacceptable. Don't you agree with that? And people go, yeah, we hate it. We shouldn't accept that. You go, okay, great. Now we agree on the premise. And if we agree on our premise, then my next thing is, then let me talk to you about how we can make that happen. So start with purpose. The next part is to find your analogy. Analogies are wonderful, super effective tools for communication. And just as a refresher, an analogy is when I have an unfamiliar concept, something that my audience won't understand maybe. I don't start explaining the unfamiliar concept. I start by explaining or introducing a familiar concept, something they already understand, and then using it to bridge to the unfamiliar concept. As a matter of fact, bridge is a good analogy for using analogies. I'm bridging between familiar and unfamiliar. And so I'm going to give you some examples because what analogies do is, one, they make us think clearly. So for instance, if I'm like, how do I explain redundancy? How do I explain that redundancy is crucial in the safe system approach? It makes me have to go, how is it? How is it crucial? How can I explain that? So it makes us clarify our own thinking into an analogy. And then once you do, now you have this little basket of tools to explain these maybe unfamiliar concepts to people. So let's do this. Let's start with the top, like our analogy for why. Our analogy for imagine a world where no one has to die. Death and serious injury are unacceptable. And people go, yeah, I know, but you can't fix stupid and people are going to die on the roads. It's unacceptable. And they say, it's just impossible. We say, well, I'll tell you what, how about this? How about we use airplanes? And if I said something like, the average jumbo jet holds something like 300 or 400 people. If 100 airplanes fell out of the sky every year and killed everybody on board, so the 40,000 people fell out of the sky, and do you think we would do something about that? Do you think we would say, that's just unacceptable? We can't. And the answer is, I know we would, because when we have a single airplane crash in this country, a severe one, we stop everything. They will shut things down to investigate, to figure this out. This can't happen. We do not accept airplane deaths in this country or anywhere in the world, as a matter of fact. It's unacceptable. And if someone were to say, well, it's just how it goes and people make mistakes and you would never get on a plane again, and neither would I. So we have an example already, an analogy of a transportation mode where we have said, no, this is unacceptable. We will. And we've all been frustrated sitting on a tarmac because some small little tiny thing happened on a door or a window, or something didn't shut right or didn't pass a checklist. And then they just stop the plane and they won't let you fly. And while that's aggravating, I don't think any of us are just sitting there going, just put it in the air. Let's see what happens. We don't do that. So we have a good analogy for why, and this is also, airplanes are a great analogy for a lot of these, a lot of the safe system approach, like redundancy. There are so many redundancies to mitigate human mistakes in an airplane system and in the airline system, that it is a fantastic analogy. So I recommend you start there. And it's hard for people won't say, oh yeah, it'd be totally fine if planes fell out of the sky. And by the way, people aren't sitting around going, we think it's okay if cars kill people. We don't think like that. It's not trying to shame people or make them feel like they want this to happen. Of course, they don't want this to happen. But what it does is the analogy puts us in a different mindset. It puts us in a different set of thinking. There's a fancy word from graduate school called entelechy. An entelechy is like think of it as roles we're playing in a play. Parent, child is an entelechy. Professor, student is an entelechy. Employer, employee. These are just some very common ones, right? So if I say I'm your professor, you're my student, we already have a script in our mind. We know how to behave. So it just, little shortcuts like that can reset our brains to have different conversations. And so this analogy I love this one. So let's talk about what's a good analogy for human mistakes and vulnerability, or a good example, or a good question, or some way to start that conversation. And this is a good one. Should mistakes be fatal? One of the principles of the safe system approach is that humans make mistakes. And for the longest time in transportation safety, and still some in transportation, you say, hey, if humans would just behave better, right? There's an entire field called human factors and we have law enforcement. We have all these ways we're trying to make humans behave better. And by the way, we should do every single one of those things. We should require seatbelts. We should put out countermeasures. We should do all these things. However, all of us know that is not going to be enough. And the question then to ask is, okay, let's assume humans are going to make mistakes, because we are. Good-hearted people make mistakes every single day. They aren't malicious and they aren't trying to, but we just do. So the question is, should they be fatal? Should I die because I messed up today? Again, apply it to any other area of your life. And the answer is a resounding no. Of course not. Of course I shouldn't die because I made a mistake. Okay, well, on the roadway, if I get drowsy and I drive or I look at my phone, I shouldn't. But what if I did? What if I look at the radio? All the things, all the mistakes people make? Should I die for that? Should someone else die for that? Should my child die for that? These are very heavy, very serious questions, but they start the right conversation. It's a way to start communicating. Say, no, 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 of course they shouldn't die. So great. How can we make it so we mitigate mistakes to the point where they are not fatal on our roadways? And you go, I don't know how. You go, great. I'll tell you how. We have this thing called the safe system approach, and it builds in these redundancies. And and see, you can start to explain it to people by starting with the right mindset. Think of it like this. I love Maslow's hierarchy of human need. You remember this from Psychology 101? Okay. Here's the deal. And this goes to human vulnerability. Okay. That other element of the principle of the safe system approach. Humans make mistakes. Humans are vulnerable. We aren't as strong as we like to think we are. We like to think, or we want to live at the top of this hierarchy. And just as a refresher from your Psychology 101 class, this represents the order in which human needs are met. The rule of Maslow's hierarchy of human need is that the bottom needs must be met first, and you cannot meet a need above it until the one below it has been met. Example: you might be on this webinar, and you might be at the top, esteem needs and self-actualization. Like, you know what? I am out here. I'm saving lives on rural roads, and I have a meaningful job, and I'm learning how to do this. I'm learning how to communicate. That is the kind of thing. And then, however, if you have the flu, okay, it doesn't mean you don't want to save lives on the roads. Of course you do. But if your physiological needs kick in, if you get super hungry, if the room you're in is super cold, these things matter. In other words, we are very vulnerable. We are very, very susceptible to our own bodies and our own vulnerable state. And our state can change all the time. And so the idea that everybody should live at the top all the time and be at their best all the time, it's not feasible. It's not realistic. And let me give you an example of how vulnerable we really are. Say you're going through your day and say you are like, you're crushing it, man. You're crushing, man. Everything is going your way. You are on top of the world. And then you get stung by a bee sting. What happens? Right? You go straight to the bottom of the hierarchy. You just had a physiological problem. And the physiology, it will knock you right off of that high you've been having, right? One little bee sting. So imagine a car crash. Humans are vulnerable and we make mistakes. And by explaining that and setting that up and going, okay, then what do we do? Because human frailty should not be a death sentence. Okay. So let's do an example of shared responsibility. So now that we understand that, we go, hey, okay, humans are going to make mistakes, but that should not be fatal, and death and serious injury are unacceptable. And we don't accept it in other areas of our lives. We don't accept it. We don't love it on construction sites anymore. We literally have an entire federal agency called OSHA to make sure that people are safe on the work site. And they didn't always used to be, and they still are not 100%, but we are a heck of a lot closer than we used to be. Fire codes have been updated because we said it's unacceptable for people to burn to death while they're working in their building. We're not doing that. It's unacceptable. Okay. So now we say this is a shared responsibility. Everybody's in this together, because you can say, well, that person on the road should do better. However, if my child is on the road out there and that person is out there, it's way harder to say, well, the responsibility is just that other person's. Actually, no, it's all of us, because I want to make sure my kid gets home. And so do you. And I want to get home safely too. And so this is all of our job, because we all share the roads. So How about this? Say you're in a rowboat and we're racing. And say you're like the third one back there, or someone you know is like three back, and they go, you know what? I don't know. I'm not feeling it today. And they put down their oar. What would happen? Right? One, the boat would slow down. Of course, obviously. But also, too, do you think that person would probably feel bad? Because, like, oh, I'm letting the team down. The boat is not moving as fast as it should. And don't you think the other team members would have something to say about that, too? Say, hey, we're in this together. We're trying to win here. This is our job together. We are a team. So think of it as we're all pulling in the same boat. It's a shared responsibility. This is something that there is no one agency or one person or one anything. So the safe system approach is a holistic approach. It is multidisciplinary by definition. Safer drivers, safer speeds, safer vehicles, post-crash care, all the pieces pulling together to save lives. And if one of those falls apart, we need the other ones to catch up and catch the slack. Which brings us to our next idea of redundancy. So redundancy is crucial in the safe system approach. And by redundancy, we mean just a redundancy of, say, countermeasures on a road. Have you ever seen of course you have, seen a rural curve. And people tend to run off rural curves because they're either going too fast or they're drowsy or it's nighttime and they don't see it or there's a visual trap, whatever happens to be. So what do we do on the, say, engineering side? What are some redundancies we can do? Well, you can put wider edge lines, make sure they're good and reflective. You can put rumble strips, chevron signs. You can widen the shoulder. If you had to, you put a guardrail. And you start stacking up these countermeasures. So if one fails, the other ones catch this person to make sure that their mistakes are not fatal, which is the goal. And this analogy is a great one. And you may have heard this one. This is not mine at all. I'm not sure where I got it, but I've heard it a bunch of places. As a matter of fact, I was at a get together at a friend's house the other day, and I had a friend in law enforcement, and he was talking about active shooter incidents, and he used the Swiss cheese model. He didn't know I even knew this, and so I heard them say that. So it's not just a transportation thing. This idea of redundancy, and so it goes like this. If I have one piece of Swiss cheese, it's got holes all in it. And if I say am driving a car and I make a mistake, that mistake can go through one of those holes. And if I go through one of those holes, I die. Okay, so one piece of Swiss cheese is not enough. We're gambling, right? It's too many holes. So you start stacking up the pieces of Swiss cheese, and each piece of Swiss cheese has holes in it, but the holes don't match up. The holes are in different spots and they overlap each other. So the piece of cheese in front of this one blocks the holes of the previous one. And if it doesn't, for some reason, you put a third piece of cheese and you just start stacking them up. And each individual has holes, but they all together build in redundancies. And so if you have 5 layers of cheese, you have 5 countermeasures or 5 actions you've taken or whatever it happens to be to save lives. If 4 of them fail and the 5th one does not, well, you saved a life. It only takes one, whether it's the 1st, 3rd, the 5th, whatever it is, to save that life. And so stacking up, being redundant is crucial when it comes to the safe system approach. Whether it's countermeasures or education or post-crash care, stacking all them up. Law enforcement, better vehicles. The vehicles are coming a long way. Having proper pressure in your tires. There's a million things we can do to stack up that Swiss cheese, to stack up the redundancy. And so this is a great way to explain why it's important. We do all the things. And so like in advertising and marketing, my job, people, when I used to work for ad firms, customers would come to us and say, hey, if I put all my money on one thing, like if it's a commercial or social media or events, whatever it is, what is the one thing I should do to get all the customers I want? And the answer is, it doesn't go like that. The answer is you put your messages out as much as you possibly can in as many different ways as you can to build redundancies. And all those redundancies build up. So that's a great analogy for redundancy. Proactivity. Safety is proactive. It's another one of the elements, or excuse me, the principles of the safe system approach. Proactivity. Well, here's some examples that we've done. Um, we did a video years ago on rumble strips. FHWA wanted a video. They said, hey, people are complaining about the noise that rumble strips make around suburban areas, especially. And so people are upset, and they're asking us to take the rumble strips out of these areas where we know they would help and they would save lives. So what do? How do we explain to people the importance? Like, that sound, while it might bother you from time to time, is important enough that you should have them and leave them there. And so we kicked that around, and we were looking for analogies. And so someone on our team came up with fire alarms. So if you're in your kitchen and something catches fire and that fire alarm goes off, it's a terrible, annoying sound, which is the entire point, right? And if your kitchen catches fire and there's an alarm going off, nobody says, that darn alarm, we just turn it off? It's so annoying. No, we go, this is great. The system worked. It got my attention, and it made sure that I could get out of my house, or I could put the fire out, or I can call the fire department, whatever it happens to be. We are grateful for that inconvenience. And so the idea is to try or in this video anyway, we use that analogy of a fire alarm and say, hey, we don't complain about that. When you hear those rumble strips, just think, oh, somebody's child just got back on the road, and they could have died if those rumble strips weren't there. Help reframe the way we think about these things. Another great analogy for the systemic approach. You know, the systemic, how to apply countermeasures systemically. Excuse me. The systemic approach is a lot like a doctor's visit. This has been a great analogy. If you go to the doctor, they look for risk factors, right? They do a family history. They do a full checkup on you. They check your blood. They check your cholesterol. They check all the things. And what they're doing is they're looking for little signals that tell them you might be in danger of certain diseases. And they know that if they can mitigate those risk factors, so for instance, if your cholesterol is too high, or your blood pressure, or your blood sugar is too high, you're at risk for diabetes or heart disease or whatever that happens to be. They know that if they will treat the risk factors, they can prevent the disease. This is common stuff, right? This is why we do wellness checks and why we go to the doctor for proactive checkups. Well, the same can be done on your roads. You can go out there and say, hey, we have had severe crashes on certain curves in our network. Look at those curves and go, hey, what's the radius on those curves? Do they have shoulders? Are there visual traps? Do they have chevron signs? Whatever it happens to be. What's the friction like? So if you find those curves where you've had these crashes and you go, are there any common characteristics? Are there any common risk factors that might signal to us we're about to have a crash out here, or we are at risk for a severe crash, even if we haven't had one? Maybe especially if we haven't had one, because we want to prevent crashes, right? You can go across your network and look for all the locations that have the same risk factors, and then go ahead out there and mitigate them proactively. Go ahead and put the rumble strips, put the chevron signs up there. Do the things that you know will reduce the risk, and you can prevent the disease, i.e. the severe crash. Okay, so this analogy has worked so well. FHWA uses it. Lots of other people do. I have to credit Jerry Roche at FHWA who gave us this one. So think of it like that. In other words, analogies are just so powerful for explaining complex topics and getting people to start conversations in vocabulary they understand, which is really the goal, right? That's the difference between talking at somebody and then talking with them. Having a transactional conversation is we have to understand the terms. That's the number one thing, defining our terms and understanding the concepts we're talking about. If we just drop that safe system approach graphic on people and start talking the details of it, there's no way. They're not going to understand what you're even talking about. And even they may be polite, and look at you while you're talking, they're not absorbing it, and they certainly aren't going to advocate for it. So then the question is, what are your analogies? And by the way, I haven't been able to read the chat. I see you all chatting in there. I love this chat. Like, y'all are go, go, go. So I'm going to go back and read this later. But if you all have any good analogies that you haven't put in there that you have found successful for explaining this elements of the safe system approach or any other thing, drop them in the chat pod, because you all are in there. You all are in there talking to people. Okay. The next sort of tip I want to give you is to go in order, to explain the safe system approach in the right order. And this comes from marketing and advertising, my background, and sales. They call this the sales funnel or the decision funnel, because sometimes the word sales freaks people out. So the decision funnel, and the fancy word for this in graduate school is called a decision sequencing model. It's just a fancy word to say this is a process through which people go to make action decisions. And these 4 steps, awareness, interest, desire, and action, are the 4 steps everyone goes through to make every action they ever do. It can be a small action or a big action. It can be like, I walk into a grocery store, or I walk into a convenience store. I'm on a road trip and I want a road trip snack. And so I walk through the aisle really quick and I look around. Well, maybe, by the way, the answer is Chex Mix, bold, right? The bold Chex Mix. Any Chex Mix people out there? Or maybe the pizza pretzel combos. Those are pretty legit. Anyway, I walk down the aisle and I go, I'm looking for the thing I want. Awareness. Is it there? Boom. I'm interested. However, say I go in and they don't have what I want. Then what do? You start looking around and you go, what looks good? And then you see any name that you might recognize or any flavor you might recognize. Awareness. Then you're interested. Okay, I want that. Is it a salty snack? Do I want something sweet? What's the price on it? Then I desire it, then I buy it. Okay, that's called a low involvement decision. Very, very quick. However, we can do this also when, like, buying a house or someone we want to marry. It's the same process over and over again. And the rule with this, it's the opposite of the hierarchy of human need, is that you cannot move people down the funnel toward action until the needs they have been met at every other level above it. So you have to go awareness, interest, desire, action. And too often we start our presentations and we start explaining things down at assuming people desire what we have, that they want to know what we are here to say, and we're going to drive them right to action. That's like the elevator speech, right? I'm supposed to, the concept, I'm going to be on an elevator for 15 seconds with somebody and tell them everything I do and get them to pay attention. It doesn't go like that. So let me lay this out for you, sort of layer up what we've been talking about. Remember, I said start with why, the purpose, what we do. If you're ordering your communication about the safe system approach this way, and you should, your purpose starts there. That puts it on their radar, that awareness level. You can say, hey, death and serious injury are unacceptable. We just can't live like this. Car crashes on the roads. Imagine a world where we didn't have to have people die in car crashes. Okay, that gets that conversation started. Once they're interested and they go, tell me more about this thing. Then you go into, because they're interested. The moment someone says, hey, tell me more, you know you've moved them down the funnel. The moment that they go, hey, tell me about that, or explain that to me. There's a lot of ways they say it, but that shows you have moved to the interest level. And then if they'll say something like, well, where can I find out more about that? Or how long has that been around? Or is there a website I can go to? You see, you're moving them down the funnel. Is there a video I can watch? Okay, so you start with why, and then you go to the how. This is how we do it. Here are the principles. Here's this. And then, like, what do you want me to do? Like, how can I do this? How can I implement the safe system approach? What can I do? Okay. That's how we order this. So unfortunately, we typically start with it flipped over. We start talking about what we want people to do, and they go, I don't even know you. I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't feel this in my heart. I don't have any kind of passion for this, but you're asking me to take action. And then we wonder why nobody takes action. And that's why. Okay, so let's apply that. Let's take our tips here, our start with why and our decision funnel, and apply it to the safe system approach. approach. So here's how I do it. I say, start here, start with this, which as you've seen, I have done in this presentation. Because if you start with this, the safe users, safe vehicles, safe roads, and all that, you get stuck. You're jumping the gun, cart before the horse, right? There's a good analogy. You are jumping into something that the audience is not ready to discuss yet. And typically, if you've seen this happen, what will happen is you'll say, we need safer vehicles. And people go, oh, the AI vehicles is going to be 50 years before we have that. Oh, and then you get into this discussion about, and you never come back out, right? You get derailed in these side conversations, but start over here. Say, hey, do we agree that death and serious injury on our roadways is unacceptable? We don't want to live like that. Imagine a world where it doesn't have to happen. And they go, yeah, I don't know, but people should just be better. I said, well, humans make mistakes, right? And we're vulnerable. We're imperfect. And even though, yes, we should be better. Yes, we should try to elicit better behaviors and educate ourselves and all the things that we know we should do, but we're still going to mess up, right? And everybody will agree to that. And you say, well, okay, well, if everybody's going to mess up, it's just inevitable. Should it be fatal? Should we die? Do you think people should die because they made a mistake on the road and did a boneheaded thing? Nobody, no good person is going to say, well, yeah, you should just die. Of course not. Of course they aren't. You say, okay, well, listen, we can all work together to do something about this. Because responsibility is shared. We all share the roads. We're all out there together. I want to protect your kids. You want to protect mine. Like we're all in this together. So maybe we should get out there and try and get ahead of this before people die. Because we shouldn't wait for people to die, right? Before we do something. No. We shouldn't wait. That would be crazy. So great. Okay, good. Well, there's all these things we can do. See, that's how you walk down this side of the safe system approach. And what you're doing is you're building a team. So even if you're just talking to one other person, you are getting them to accept your premises. Right now, we agree on values. We share a common set of values around transportation safety, and then they can say, okay, well, this is great. Actually, I agree with you on all this. So what do we do? How do we do that? Great. Here's how we're going to do it. And we have this approach, and it has multiple elements. And we need safer road users and safer vehicles, and everybody does their part. It's see, okay, that's how you explain it to people based on the principles of the decision funnel. This is 101 marketing and sales information. We do this all the time. We build campaigns around this kind of thing. This is how it works. So if you can apply this to that, you're going to be in better shape. And then throw some analogies in there, and you're building up this really good way to explain this. Okay, so then the last tip here is tell them what to do. This is very common for people to explain something and get the audience on side and go, yeah, I want to know more about that. Yeah, I want to do that. And then never give them a task, never give them an action, something to do. So the last thing is give people something to do. So, okay, fine, I'm bought in. How do I implement the safe system approach? You want to give them what they call a CTA. In advertising, we call it, it's a call to action. You'll see like a buy now button, right? You say, you love this product, buy now. Sign up for our newsletter, whatever it is. We give people actions to do, and if you build the case and then give them an action to do, they are much more likely to do it in the moment. So, for instance, you can say, well, you can work with others. You can go introduce yourself to your public health people, to your law enforcement folks, and start building a team and explaining the safe system approach to them. If you're in a rural area, you guys all know each other. Right? I mean, everybody knows everybody in the rural areas. It's one of their great advantages of this is that you can communicate, you can find people, you can talk to your commissioners, you can talk to your fire chief, you can talk to your school superintendent. Go out and start talking about the safe system approach and see what they have to say about it. That's an action you can take. You probably already know them anyway. You can make a local road safety plan or a safety action plan. Everybody can do these. Everyone should. And there is a website out there to help you do this. There is your local technical assistance program will probably help you do this. Your LTAP, the National Center for Rural Road Safety. We can give you information on how to do this. And a local road safety plan is built on the safe system approach. It's a core thing. You build a team. You think holistically. So making a local road safety plan is a great way to take action to implement the safe system approach. And by the way, it is also a very good way to access money. 8-cent money in some states. Safe Streets and Roads for All, SS4A money, is built on these things. So you can get money to even make one. You can become a road safety champion. We at the National Center for Rural Road Safety have our Road Safety Champion program. Jamie talked about that at the beginning. It's free. You can get all your people trained on this. It's like a safety 101 course for people. And everybody can have a little bit more knowledge about this and other safety tasks. So you can become a road safety champion program. Or you can become a safety champion, a road safety champion through the Road Safety Champion program. These are just some ways you can tell people what to do. People want to be led, especially if they buy into what you are selling, right? If you're selling the safe system approach and they think this is great, and then you don't tell them anything you can do about it, well, you've left them high and dry. Okay, so don't forget that part. Don't forget to give them something concrete to do. Now, the next tip is to rinse and repeat. Repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. Let me give you some marketing words that will maybe help you understand this. So we have our decision funnel. We have our start with why. We have all these tips in our brains. I want to layer them up for you. This is how communication firms do this. This is how big corporations do this, big organizations. This is how salespeople work. This is how it works. So 2 marketing words that will help you communicate the safe system approach. One is called reach, and the other is called frequency. Let me explain what these mean and why they're crucial to this. Reach goes like this. I have a message. I have something in my mind that I want to get into your mind. For instance, I want these tips. I want this presentation to get into your mind. And so what I do is I pick a channel and I get you together and I communicate through that channel to reach you with it. This is happening right now. We're on this webinar. You hear my voice. You see my slide deck. I am reaching you right now. Okay, that's great. My message reached you one time. And that's the start, and that's okay. So think of that funnel, right? That starts at the awareness level. We're really at the top. The problem is with most communication, most advertising and marketing, is that we stop there. And we say, well, we reached them. We gave them the presentation. We showed them the video. Why aren't they taking action? Why they haven't done anything with the information? I guess the campaign didn't work, or it just didn't. Okay. The problem is reach is just the beginning. To get really effective with communication and to see real action, you need frequency. You need the same message to reach the same people over and over and over again. I get this question a lot when I present on communication or social media or working with local media. They say, "Are people going to get bored with our message? Aren't they going to they'll see our social post over and over again. They'll just get bored. They'll tune us out. If we use the same messaging over and over and over, should we change our messaging up?" And the answer is no to both of those questions. If you get messaging that works, that is effective, never, ever, ever change it unless it stops being effective. And never stop talking about it. Repeat it over and over and over again, especially nowadays, because people, their attention spans are shattered. We have too many channels and too many ways our brains are being pulled. And so the chances that everybody in your audience saw your Facebook post and did something about it the first time they ever saw it is just not realistic. You can't say it enough. And I have a presentation I do on public service announcements, and I love doing that one because it's a good example of frequency. So if I were to say to you and ask you to finish this sentence, my sentence is give a hoot, right? And everybody out there just said, don't pollute. Why'd you say that? You know why? Because you heard that phrase for decades. If I say only you, and you say can prevent forest fires, The public service announcement people know how to do this. They just won't stop. Frequency, frequency, frequency. And that's how you get it deep into people's minds. And they won't even know where it came from. The messaging will just be there. And so what I'm saying is, this takes way longer than it might seem to see real change happen. So we are just at the beginning of discussing and promoting and implementing the safe system approach. And so in a year or 2 years, if we don't see big results and we don't see earth-shattering declines in our fatalities, it doesn't mean it's not working. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means this stuff takes frequency. So I don't want you to be discouraged when I say that. Let me give you some encouragement. I mentioned before some big systemic problems that we've had before that we overcame as a society, that if you were to say them, like polio, for instance, if you were to say them when we were in the midst of those really big, very sticky, entrenched social problems, and said, hey, I bet we can solve this. I bet we can make this go away, for the most part, people would say, no way. Well, let me give you an example. How many of you out there are old enough to remember smoking on airplanes? I am. I'm 51 years old. And so I'm solidly Gen X. I grew up in that generation where it seemed like everybody smoked cigarettes. Movie theaters, restaurant. Hey, remember the smoking section, air quotes, smoking section in restaurants where it was just like a little partition and you're all sharing the same air conditioning system, or an airplane where they had a curtain. It was ridiculous. We were ridiculous back then. Everybody smoked. Even if your family did not smoke, you probably had ashtrays in the cabinet. So when you had family come over, or friends who smoked, you were being polite to put out an ashtray for them because you assumed they were going to smoke in your living room. It's gross. But this is how we lived. Smoking was everywhere. And if you were to walk up to someone in 1978 or 1983, when I was growing up, and you were to say, hey, I think we can pretty much banish smoking from all of our public spaces. What do you think? They would say, well, here's the thing. I was in a McDonald's this morning and there were ashtrays on the tables by the play area in McDonald's, which is totally true, by the way. That's a McDonald's ashtray. That person would laugh in your face and say, that is impossible. Can't be done. No way. Smoking is too pervasive. Everybody does it. There is no possible way. You're just going to have to get used to it. Well, it took a long time, but if you are in any public space now, save a few little bars left over, if you're in your office, if you're in a restaurant, if you're on an airplane or in a hospital or any public space, and someone lights a cigarette, what happens? We all freak out. It doesn't happen. Why? Because we made up our minds that we don't want this in our society anymore. It is unacceptable to smoke in public places. It's unacceptable. So we all got ahead of it. We all worked together and we just got rid of it. It took a long time. I'm making it sound simpler than it was, of course. But think of the frequency over time that had to happen to get a societal change like that, and it's working. Now, I'm not here to tell you nobody smokes. Of course not. Of course not. However, we've made giant strides. And it's not just with that. Teen birth rates. Teen birth rates. It used to be a pretty common thing during the baby boomers. It was the majority of teenager women or babies were born to teenagers. Now it's super low. Infant mortality rates. If you ever go to an old cemetery, I'm sure we all have done that, you see all those tiny little graves, all those child graves. You don't see those as much anymore. Thank goodness. Look at that drop. When we make up our mind, we can solve big, big problems. We can solve them. And we do it more than I think we give ourselves credit for. And I think the reason is because it happens so slowly over time. It's hard to give ourselves credit for the great work that we do as societies around or as communities around the country and work together. We can work on traffic fatalities. Absolutely. So the question is, how long does this take? Say, Kev, that smoking yeah. The answer is look at the timelines on these things. They are in decades. They are not in years. And so what I want to tell you is you're going to spend your career working on this. And it's a good thing to spend your career on. I've been doing this 10 years now, and I don't regret it at all because I've seen progress in small ways over time. It can be done. You probably have to. If you think back, if you've been in this business for very long, you can look back and things are slowly changing. It's another analogy is turning the battleship, right? You're turning these battleships. It takes forever to do, and it's hard work over time, but it's worth doing. So strap yourself in and say, I'm going to spend my career making a dent in this, helping drive those numbers down. And the safe system approach is a way to do it. And then if you're talking to people and we go down we have these spirited discussions and we talk about details and we talk about this and what's possible and what's not. It's always good to circle back and end with why. End with why are we doing this in the first place? Why do we get out of bed every day and promote the safe system approach? And this is one of mine. This is my daughter, Annie. Annie is currently 24 years old and she's doing great. She's thriving and she's married and like productive and paying her own bills. Thank goodness. Those of you parents out there who have 20 something children, I feel like we won the Super Bowl and the jackpot all at one time. The child is paying her own bills. We love it. This is Annie. And when she was 17, I got the phone call that no parent wants to get in the middle of the night. That Annie had been in a severe crash. So, and I, of course, get in my car and I go find where she is. And I show up on scene and it's all the things you don't want to see, right? It's police cars, a fire truck out there. And my daughter's car is flipped over on its top in the middle of train tracks. And thank goodness Annie was there and she was okay. But the tow truck driver pulled me to the side. He said, "Hey, man." Or I asked Annie, I said, okay, what happened? And the typical story, she was in a car with a few friends. They were driving too fast and they were goofing off and just being teenagers with undeveloped prefrontal cortexes. And they were just driving too fast and the driver lost control of the car. The car rolled over several times and landed on its top in the middle of train tracks, with the train track running right down the middle between the passenger and the driver's seat. And the tow truck driver told me, he said, "Hey, man, I've been doing this a long time." And he said, "I've seen scenes like this that were less severe than this, and everybody died. You should thank your lucky stars that your child and her passengers are walking away from this, because I don't see that very often." Thank goodness they were all wearing their seatbelts, so that frequency got through because we had pounded it in her head her entire life, and probably saved her life. Certainly saved her from severe injury, but she could have died, and thank goodness she did not. But every time this work gets hard and it gets difficult and it takes forever, I think back to that night when I got that phone call and I said, you know what? If I can wake up today and make it so that we get closer so no other parent has to get a call like that, and certainly a parent doesn't get the call that I could have gotten, which was, you've just lost your daughter on the side of a road to a severe crash that could have been prevented. I don't wish that on anybody. Well, that's why I do what I do. That's why I'm passionate about this. And that's why you have some version of this too. You have a why in your mind, and it's why this is meaningful work and we should keep at it. And we should learn how to communicate the safe system approach, and we should learn how to talk to people about this and persuade them that this is a worthwhile endeavor, is to eliminate roadway fatalities from our roadways, that death and serious injury are unacceptable. So those are my tips. There are smiling, happy faces at the end of this. And I wanted to leave time at the end for questions or answers or whatever other feedback you have. I see the chat pod is super duper active. I really wish I could go in here and read a lot of this. I'm just scanning, and there's some very spirited, very passionate talking going on. I love this. You all keep it up. But I do want to turn this over at this point to Jamie and have some time at the end of this to have Q&A to talk about this. So Jamie, have we received any questions, or do we want to pick up any threads from the chat, or what do we want to tackle here?
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions for you in the Q&A that I'm going to ask.
Okay.
So the first one is that we have someone who agrees on the premise, but says, how do you interact with someone who refuses to agree that death and serious injury are unacceptable? So do you agree to disagree because they've recently had a conversation like that? Or is there
Yeah.
some kind of analogy that could be used? We also have a lot of the chats going on in the chat pod are a few people who don't agree with that premise.
Yeah.
And so there's some back and forth going on there too, but do you have any tips for that?
Yeah. So back to frequency, right? We've all had this conversation or some version of that conversation. This is impossible, and people fair enough. Okay, so that's they don't accept that premise, and that's okay because we can disagree. However, um, over time, for instance, I do this when I explain roundabouts. There is again, it's framing and presenting your premise. When I present roundabouts, I typically do it like this. When you're starting with why, I say, "Hey, how many?" Or if I'm in a live room and I say, "How many of you have heard a story, a news story in your area of a family at a four-way stop, and for whatever reason, a school bus or a dump truck or just another vehicle blows through the four-way stop and T-bones that family and kills people at that intersection? How many of you have heard a story like that in your community?" And the answer is everybody's heard a story like that in their community because it's such an unfortunately common thing to happen. And then you say, well, hey, what if there were an intersection design that could basically guarantee that would not happen again? That nobody would die at that intersection again, or it would drastically reduce the chances of it. Would you like to hear about that intersection? And what that does is it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to agree with you right away, but it also does reframe that, because if we say, and I'm scanning through the chat, this is a super good conversation. If I'm scanning, so if I say death and serious injury are unacceptable, does that mean a death and serious injury will never happen, or I can guarantee it? I can't. But I can, in my mind, say I don't want anybody else to die in my community at that four-way stop. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen again. Roundabouts are a great way to do that. And what it does is we can agree that we don't want people to die in our towns. We don't want people to die on our roads. So in other words, you're looking for a small point of agreement, but even then, it can take time. Conversations take time. And then people may not change their position. I can't guarantee that, however, it is harder and harder over time but I do recommend you don't get snarky and you don't get mean and you don't get that, because that doesn't solve anything or help anything. Give yourself some time, give yourself some grace, and continue the conversation with frequency over time and see what that gets you.
We have a couple other questions in here, and you may or may not be able to answer some of these because some of them are a little bit more technical, Kevin, than on the
Okay. Well, if you're more technical than I am,
communication
so if
side.
you can answer those too if they're good for you.
Yep, but so we'll try a few of these. One of them is why does safe system approach work in some countries but fail in others?
So I've talked to people in Australia. I've actually met some of them because Australia is an example of where it has made a dent, and also in Sweden. And I haven't talked to anybody directly from there, but I have read quite a bit about it. It's the big one to me, and this is just me, is when a society finally gets the responsibility is shared concept. That's when things start to change. And so in other words, it's how serious are you implementing this? And the countries that have seen results, and by the way, in some of these countries like Australia have seen results and then they sort of back off on implementing and the crashes go back up. So it's not a matter of the principles or the elements, it's how vigorously we implement them. So think of airlines. We vigorously implement airline safety. It's just unacceptable. People, and so um, it's a matter of public will, which is very, very hard. We all know it's very, very hard, but we've done it for other things. So that's in just the ones people I have talked to is when the society goes, no, we're not going to have smoking on airplanes anymore. Sorry, I mean, we're just not going to live like that, or in hospitals, or in schools, or whatever. And we understand that this is a shared responsibility to make this better. Things can then happen very, very quickly. In other words, there's no one thing. This by definition is a multidisciplinary team effort, and that makes it hard, and it makes it tricky, and it makes it take longer. But when it kicks in, I think most big societal problems are solved when the responsibility is shared, and we all, in our own way, push toward the same goal.
I think another thing that's coming up in the chat pod about this too, Kevin, is that it's taken them quite a few years to get
Yeah.
there and to see
Oh yeah.
improvements. And so it's continuing to work on this, right? There's a few people in the chat pod saying they've been seeing these other countries work on it since the 90s. So it's
Yeah.
taken quite a while.
It does. Yeah, it does. It is decades. We're in this, and that, by the way, in a weird way, can be encouraging if you just set your expectations. In other words, think in decades, not years, and it tends to give you a different perspective.
Yeah. Another question for you is, can you talk about the pushback we get from working with engineers and those who just want to make the roads compliant based on roadway standards?
Yeah. Again, frequency. It. I was talking with on the podcast. As a matter of fact, I recommend Nick Parr, who is the roadway director in Boone County, Indiana. Great guy. The episode is not published yet, but it's going to be soon. And in that interview, and I've talked with Nick before, he said, "Hey, I was just a maintenance guy when when I met him. He was on the maintenance team in Boone County." And he said, "Of course, we didn't want people to die on the roads or anything, but he said I didn't think of myself as a safety person. I thought of myself as a maintenance. I maintain the roads. I fix guardrails and do chip seal and maintenance things." He said, "I didn't think of myself as a safety advocate, but they had a county engineer at the time who introduced this idea that we are all in the safety business." And he said, over time, I started to realize, oh, wait a minute, that chip seal we're putting on the road that's a safety countermeasure, and fixing that guardrail and making sure that speed limit signs are straight and put in the right, like, maintenance is like, I am a safety advocate. And so Nick has taken that now in his leadership position. And he says now in Boone County, everybody from the receptionist to the maintenance people to the engineers to everybody, if you were to ask them, what's your job here? And our job is to make sure people in Boone County, Indiana, get home safely every day. That it took years and it took time, but he changed his mind on what his job was. And if it happens for Nick and it happens in his agencies or his agency, you can see it happen. It just takes a very long time. In advertising, another advertising term, we call it drip campaign. This is dripping. You want to know why you get 38,000 spam emails every day? And I know it's annoying. Unfortunately, it works. I wish it didn't, but these emails, they drip. And eventually they get you to open one, and eventually you see something you like, and eventually, so it's a long game of small frequency instead of one big blast that changes everything, or one conversation, or one. It just doesn't go like that. I wish it did, but it just doesn't. You're gonna have to give yourself time and go over and over, and so then these conversations change over time. The systemic approach, that doctor analogy that I used, I remember when we started promoting that, we promoted it for a full 2 years before I heard anybody else around the country ever use it. I'll never forget, I was in Kansas City and I heard a guy use that analogy. So it's like a doctor visit. And I almost gave him a hug because it took 2 years, but he had heard about it. It finally started to sink in. So I think if I had one message, I would think that frequency over time is probably the hardest thing, but it's also the most effective thing.
We've had a couple of questions in the chat pod and the Q&A pod that I'm not going to ask because they're related more to the 5 elements. and more on the technical side, and that's not really what today's webinar is about. However, I did just post in the chat pod our webinar archive, and we have held some webinars in the past on the technical aspects of each of those 5 elements of the safe system approach. And probably as I'm looking back through this, we haven't covered all 5 elements in quite some time. If you look back to our archive in 2021, we went through each of the different elements. And so perhaps we need to go back and do that again. So that's something we'll consider doing. There are sprinkled throughout the years. There are some on each of the particular elements. So we did some in 2023 on speed, well, when we did Rural Road Safety Awareness Week that year on that. This year we tackled post-crash care because our Rural Road Safety Awareness Week was on that particular topic. So again, we'll consider going back through all 5 of them again as part of our webinar series. But I did post that archive. This webinar, we did get asked about this. This webinar will also be on that webinar archive webpage within the week. So in case you wanted to listen back to it again. So the next question that we had for you, Kevin, you spoke about vulnerabilities. Are there enough redundancies built into the system for vulnerable road users? Why should there be more redundancies built for automobile users and not as many for vulnerable road users?
The answer is probably not enough out there because we keep having people die on the roads, right? So if people keep dying on the roads, the redundancies, I think by definition, probably aren't there, like across the board. As far as implementing countermeasures for vulnerable road users, that's sort of a community by community and state by state thing, right? So there are some out there who are. It depends on, say, in a rural area, if you have wide shoulders for bikes to make room for them. That there are countermeasures that people are putting out there. I can't, of course, speak to anybody's particular usage of those or putting in, but the idea that we have done everything we can, I don't think anybody would say that, right? Because we still have people keep dying on the roads. So yeah, the vulnerable road users, and especially vulnerable road users in rural areas, because as we know, in rural areas, everything is different than say in urban. It is, but also too, the solutions are usually at a very community level because the rural areas are very small, but people know each other, and so a lot of times that looks different in different areas. But no, I don't think anybody could say that we've done all we can for vulnerable road users or any road users, whether or vehicle users for that matter. There's still lots of work to do.
Another question that came in, you've been talking a lot about selling safe system approach. So someone is interested in what the financial impact of implementing the safe system approach might be.
Yeah, you mean like so could we do? Can we afford to put enough countermeasures out there? Can we afford to? I think if that's what you're asking, um, of course, especially in rural areas, um, they by definition have more lane miles, usually less money, less staff, all the things, right? That's the challenge out there. However, that's the value of the multidisciplinary approach. So you have all the 5 elements, and you have the safer vehicles, you have better post crash care, and everybody doing their part. So the responsibility doesn't fall on just one agency. So it's not on your county agency to figure out how to solve the entire roadway traffic fatality problem in their area. Everybody shares the responsibility, and so the cars are getting smarter all the time. This is just me, by the way. This is just Kevin. I think a lot of this is going to we're going to be surprised at what our cars can do to keep us safe and people outside our cars in the next 10 years. I think we're going to be shocked at what these vehicles can do. So I have a lot of hope for the safer vehicle. Um, I have a lot of hope for all of this, but I'm very excited to see what these cars are going to be able to do in the years to come to keep us safer. But yeah, it's a multidisciplinary thing. As far as the financial impact, I think what you mean is what investment should we make, or how much can we afford to invest that much? The answer is I don't know because I don't know what all of these are going to look like, but I think everybody doing their part as much as they can is the goal. And then listen, again, this is just Kevin. This is just me. I can't, it's not me speaking for anybody or guaranteeing anything, but I think, but it's happened in other areas like smoking and other ways, is that this thing, it takes a long time to get there. And then all of a sudden you see a dramatic breakthrough. I have no idea what that's going to look like. Honestly, this is just me. But I think that is going to happen. We're going to get a culmination of things culturally. We're going to get a thing engineering wise, vehicles, safer users, educate. I think it's all going to come together. And I'm not saying that we will have zero fatalities in my lifetime or anything. I'm saying I just think if everybody keeps doing their part, history shows with these other big systemic problems that you wear them down and then you start seeing dramatic drops. But again, that's not Kevin saying that this is going to happen in a certain timeline. I just think that's the case.
And I think too that the first step in safe system approach is learning about it, and the education on it
Mm,
is free in most places. So starting there is a really great place so that you can understand what it is and how you could potentially implement some of these aspects. And some of them you may already be implementing, which is
mm,
fantastic. And then we did have someone in the chat pod also say about the cost too, when you look at what some of these safety projects cost versus the societal costs of losing someone and of fatalities
mm,
happening, right? It's obviously saving money because the people who are losing are humans with families and friends, and that, as we've said earlier, that's one of the pieces of being unacceptable in there. So another question that we have for you as well, Kevin, is do you find that analogy approach, for instance, the one you used of math for probability of car crashes versus airplane crashes, and the
mm.
unequal response to both of them, have you found that to be effective?
I have. Yes, absolutely. To start those conversations. I'm not saying it makes people agree with me all the time, but they will talk to me. If I say, or in my experience, they will. So because I've given this presentation enough, and sometimes people come up to me and go, that's a bad analogy. You're not going to do it. And I said, well, tell me why. But at least now we're talking. So remember, at the awareness level, at that top of that funnel, if I want to get you talking to me, I start with why. I say, yeah, we don't accept this in other areas of life like airplanes. And so some people might go, we don't. I've had people do that to me. They go, I hadn't thought of it that way. Right. We absolutely don't accept deaths on the airline system. And then some people will say, well, I don't know, man. You can't control the road system like you. It's like, okay, well, then at least let's talk about it. Let's talk about what that might look like. Um, but yeah, absolutely. I find it as a good analogy for starting that conversation around whether we should accept death and serious injury. Yes.
And with that, we have come to the end of the questions that were related to the communication aspect. So I thank you very much, Kevin, for coming to present today and sharing your wisdom on the communication and how to sell the safe system approach. As you mentioned, we had a lot of questions. We had a lot of great chats
Great
going
chat.
on. So thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me. You all, thank you for getting in here and being so engaged. This is great.
This was great. Thank you all for joining us. Again, don't forget that Road Safety Champion program is going on right now. You can take a look at registering on our website. We do have that brand new podcast that just got released this week, so take a look at that as well. And I did drop in the chat pod earlier, our archived webinars, and so take a look at those as well. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you one more time, Kevin. We appreciate you being here to present.
Most welcome. Thank you.